when we take our ego and we attach it to this reality, there is a very simple agreement that you'll go myopic and you'll forget everything. It's like amnesia comes over you.
Yes.
When you have a near-death experience, which I've had, then you enter.
Woo!
Oh my God. I don't know.
Welcome to the I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast. The podcast is dedicated to conscious souls looking to change the world. Astrologer by day, climate activist by night. Here is your host, Debra Silverman.
Welcome to the Debra Silverman I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast. I haven't done a live interview, I want to say like 6 months. So I'm very excited, one, because it's you, that's the real truth, because I'm in shock at the level of impact that the interview I watched with you about your near-death experience had on me. That I watched it twice. I've been watching the third time. It's so rare. I mean, I've watched them all the time. I have to confess to this audience of mine that I have kind of an addiction to near-death experiences. It's kind of like my secret, like guilty pleasure. I probably shouldn't do it all the time because it's not really the right answer to be fascinated with near death, but there's such a beautiful bridge that you particularly make as a Pisces drinking water between two worlds, that you really have such an unbelievable access to both sides. And I will describe that in your chart. So we are here today to have I'm speaking during a full moon in Scorpio. I think it's so funny about my deep love. This is going to sound bad. My deep love for death. I know, just sounds bad. And that I've had a mistress in a sense where you're not really supposed to tell anyone you're in love with death because it sounds like you're having an affair on life, which is kind of true for me. And yet the bridge is so important, particularly in these times with Mary having a skeleton behind her, that there's so much transformation occurring in our reality right now. And the invitation for all of us is to re-examine our relationship with life and death. And I want to just finish with one more before I get to you. My dear friend passed away on the 20th, was a couple of days ago, and he was very good friends with Atwater. You probably know P.W. Atwater wrote a compilation of all the near-death experiences across time. She's brilliant.
They're very good friend.
Well, she's very good friends with my friend who passed. And this is why I'm doing this today for him, because he left without peace. He did not leave here, as I would have expected, having studied near death his whole career. He was such good friends with her. Why would he leave with such resistance? Only because his ego and his body was so captured by the pain of his cancer. So I honor this interview to him. I am in such love with this. He was a neighbor. His wife and him were home to me, and I'm going to cry. A huge gap in my life and in this neighborhood without him. And I know that I've been talking to him, to your point, that he's hovering. I wanted to ask some questions about that when they first go. Is he around? Yes. And just to say, Tim, the compilation of material that I know Mary's involved in and Atwater's involved in, and so many people, please, as an audience, do your homework to make a relationship with death. It's not what you think it is. That's the wrong word. In Hawaii, they call it changing addresses. Like you're just moving. Okay.
Just moving home. Yep.
Back to you, Mary. So please introduce yourself. I always ask the interviewee to introduce themselves and just tell us about your background, those things on the back of your wall, and then just a little bit of how you find yourself here today.
Well, I find myself, I told you before we started rolling that somebody absconded with my ring light. So you are currently propped on a 6'6" skeleton in my chiropractic office, which is just so apt. And so I'm Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. I am obviously not from Ireland, but I live in Ireland for the last 25 years. I came here. People always ask, were you chasing a man? No, I was actually chasing ancient symbols, and ended up being drawn into this place and knowing that this was my next forever. Yeah, so I've been here 25 years practicing chiropractic metaphysics, writing books, and just having the time of my life. So,
okay. And so let me just, for the moment, just pull up your chart, because the audience, many of my audience is captured by astrology. And so I just want to start by saying we have Sun in Pisces, which is the sign of two fish going in opposite directions. Here's the symbol, because they bridge worlds. They have multiple realities that coexist. And because it's in the 10th house of Capricorn, it's a professional Pisces, which is the highest regard for being able to be the channel, echoed by this auspicious position of Mercury, which is the mind, in the sign of Aquarius, where it's the most comfortable and all obviously part of this big triangle. But what this Mercury talks about is a futurist, someone who goes into the future, comes back into the past, goes to the other world, then brings us back the messages. So this is a very profound indicator that you're a writer and you're a thinker, and you're very advanced, especially because it's part of this big grand trine. And then the third variable is, this is why I asked you what time you were born. The moon is the fastest moving planet in the heavens, and yours is at 29 degrees. There's only 29 degrees in a sign. So it was the very last 10 minutes of being in a grounded sign of Taurus, because if you were anything else, if you were 10 minutes later, you would have been in Gemini, which would have made you a flake. And you are not a flake because of this. You're very grounded, and you will see that soon, that she's a doctor, but her emotional stability has a profound gift. And that degree is so significant because it was only within minutes of the birth that the moon was going to leave into the next sign. And then look at it. It's opposite these two planets, Mars and Neptune in Scorpio, the ability, Mars, male energy, Neptune, the visionary, to hook up her emotional intuition. The moon is the dark part of us that works at night, with this very intense mystical relationship with death that showed up as a child. So you compound Mercury in Aquarius being a communicator of the other side, Sun in Pisces being the example of the person that goes between the worlds, and then you add this exact degree, the moon, opposite these two planets in Scorpio, saying, I can see dead people. So I start there. I kind of cheated and gave them the astrology version, but can you talk about that as a kid, how Judge came in and how...
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. The title of the very first book that I wrote was called Promised, and Simon & Schuster later changed it to Promised by Heaven, which is their whatever. But for me, it was Promised, because as a child, I grew up being told all the time by my father, no matter what happened, no matter how badly I messed up, or, whatever I was upset about, my father always said, you're promised. You're promised. And where that started.
And your father was a pastor. Don't leave that out.
Yes, Southern Baptist. But he wasn't a holy roller. He was he was a football coach who left the seminary because he felt like he could impact more people's lives on the football field. And his sermons on a Sunday morning were all about sports. So his churches were always packed. And he was just it was always about, there was never fire and brimstone, like the typical kind of Southern Baptist motif. He was always like a motivational speaker. He was always about potential and what you could do to reach that. It was not about, you're not going to get into heaven if you do this. This is how you're getting in.
And how did he deal with the dead people? Because at such a young age.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's where it got interesting, because when my mother was pregnant with me, and she was over 40 at this stage, so I was a surprise. And when they went in, my mother was in her first trimester. She found out that she had the German measles. And so I didn't find out until actually a couple of years ago. She told me this. She said that 6 different doctors came in and advised that they abort me because I wasn't going to be okay, because she had a severe case of German measles, and that was in the developing phases in that first trimester. Not good news. So they went away with this information. And of course, Dad, being a praying man, he constantly prayed about it and all, until he had this event. And what was so cool about this is the way he described it. So you would think, he's a preacher, he's, very Bible based, and you would think he would describe, he had like an angelic visit or whatever. He always called it celestial. He always said celestial, which I thought was so peculiar. But it turns out that the beings that came to him had no wings. So they didn't fit in the kind of archetype of an angel that would have been familiar to him. So he said these two beings came in, and not only did they tell him that his daughter, remember this is 1968 that my mother would have been pregnant, because I was born in February 69. And so not only would his daughter be okay, but that she was going to come in with some very unique abilities. So, like, how do you deny the reality of that? Like, my father is going, okay, there is no box in my cupboard that this fits into, but this happened to me. So it's one of those, it's the beauty of the earth realm. I love that dichotomy when you're so certain about who you are and your faith and all this, and then something comes in that is undeniable, but so polar opposite to what you actually believe. And so that's how it
So when
happened.
you were little, and this is a story that you guys need to hear, there was a man called Judge who had passed, but she was only a little person, and she was giving messages to her dad that she should never have known. So he was in dead people, like, oh, someone down the street is gonna.
Well, Judge is my mother's father, and Judge was a surgeon from Kentucky. And so it's actually Judge who worked with, I'm sure you're familiar with Edgar Cayce, and Judge consulted with Edgar Cayce regularly. He was, when he was 15 years old, Cayce was speaking in
Edgar Cayce was a double Pisces.
And also nicknamed Judge. But when my grandfather was 15 and he started having these incredible kind of gifts reveal themselves, Cayce was speaking in Lexington, Kentucky, and my grandfather was from Winchester, and he went over, and it was Cayce who ended up telling my grandfather that he was going to go off and become a doctor, and that he would be utilizing these abilities. And then they ended up doing some work together later on, which I find. So the Edgar Cayce ARE, I've launched several books there. It's, it's in my home state. It's just a huge part of my heart. But it was really interesting because Judge had these abilities that were coming through his hands, and it was Cayce who was explaining to him what was going on. And so after my grandfather died, people started coming out of the woodwork with these crazy stories of healing and supernatural things that Judge, the doctor, was able to do as Judge, the metaphysician. And but he was also my best friend. So when I was a child, Judge used to sit me down. He would tell me stories. He talked about medical stuff, the human body, things that were pretty heady for a little kid.
You could see him?
Oh, yeah. But
so the disembodied person who's dead, you could see visually.
Well, I didn't even know he was dead at that stage, because I had what I've always called the kitchen table talk. I was 4 years old, and my dad, with his big, deep, booming Southern voice, he called me in, and, my mom's kind of sitting there with big eyes, and they're sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm always talking about Judge and what Judge has told me. And Dad sits me down. He said, "Sugar, do you know the difference between alive and dead?" And I was like, 4. And my dad was about to lose it, because I'm telling him stuff about Judge that Judge would have said that there's no way a 4-year-old would know. And so this was when they realized that this prophetic message he got from these celestial beings, when they said I was going to have these strange gifts, well, now they're starting to come to fruition. Oh, she can see dead people. And so the way that I'm looking at you right now, Debra, this is I love that smartphones came into existence for all their goods and evils. It makes what I do so easy to describe. So I'm looking at this beautiful, moving, real-time image of you. I know that you're sitting in that amazing sun-filled room somewhere in this world, and that you're a real 3D flesh and blood person, and I'm speaking to you. But you're actually a 2D image coming across on a phone to me. So when speaking to you, I have no doubt whatsoever that you're alive and you're real. So when you've got a holographic projection of someone who's coming in from a different realm as a 4-year-old, like, why would you think that it's anything other than a real person sitting somewhere else who's speaking to you in present time? So, it's made it really easy with the iPhones, the smartphones, that when you've got different apps, when we're talking about time traveling, exactly.
Okay,
you're just moving through dimension.
Take us to November, to your near-death experience. It's a big jump.
Okay. So that was December 14th,
Oh.
1991. And I was 21. I just graduated from college. So I just spent 4 years getting my degrees in communications, graphics. I'd worked for ABC TV in Florence. I was going to move to Charleston, South Carolina with my college sweetheart. And I was 6 months out of college, and I was going to a Christmas party. And I was wearing my Santa Claus t-shirt and a jingle bell and my bright red Bermuda shorts. And I'm traveling towards town, and I get to this crossroads of a major highway in Charleston, and I'm sitting at a red light. And so I wait and I wait, and my red light changes finally. And I have to drive all the way across the traffic and then make a left towards town. So I'm in the driver's side exposed to, the paused oncoming traffic. Well, it should have been paused, and it wasn't. There was one guy who put the pedal to the metal and floored it through a red light. And as I was turning, he hit me at 75 miles per hour. But where my whole world changed in that moment was everything slowed down, and I got to make the choice of remaining inside my body and experiencing the impact, or exiting the body and watching my own death.
What do you mean you
which
got to make
sounded-
a choice?
Yes, I know. Totally didn't teach me that in Sunday school, did they? So I'm like, everything's moving at a snail's pace. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've done this before. It was so familiar. It wasn't scary, because what's happening is everything is suspending, and you suddenly realize, that you are a born time bender. And everything around me is giving me ample time to decide, do you want to be in the body and knocked out, when that car hits you, because I was going to get T-boned. And I was like, yeah, you know what? That's going to hurt. But I suddenly also had this feeling that I'd done it before. There was no wisdom to be gained from experiencing that kind of traumatic impact and pain as the last thing before I left the body. So this sound came in, and I always liken it to a bagpipe drone. And this sound came in, and next thing, whoop, I am up and out. Everything is speeding back up, and I watch the car hit me. And I watch my head go through the window. I watch my neck break, my seat fold, the glass blow out. And I always describe it as, it was like coming in after a hot day outdoors, peeling off your dirty clothes, throwing them by the washing machine, and going up and having the best shower of your life. The last thing you're thinking about is the dirty clothes next to the washing machine. That's what it was like coming out of the body. So there you have it.
And what was, oh my God, that was the best analogy. I'm tracking you. Exactly. Okay, keep going. So now you're out of your body.
So now I'm out of my body, and I'm watching, and everything is now sped back up into what we call real time, and I am watching the car spin around the intersection. I've just seen the neck break. And now people are starting to gather. What was really bizarre is Charleston at the time was probably about 350,000 people. So it's not a small town. And a couple of cars back was a girl I had gone to college with, which was about 3 hours away, by the way. And there she was, a couple of cars behind me. I got to watch her realize that it was me and my car. And it was the strangest thing, because it was like I was watching her, and I was just thinking to myself, I may as well been sitting back eating popcorn, going, hey, ma'am, it's all good. I'm good. I'm right here. I'm intact. Because what was happening in that moment, as I'm watching people begin to congregate, and you can see the dead body sitting in the car, and I'm going, as much as a spirit can, oh my gosh. Oh yeah. I could still remember who I was. I knew who I'd been. I knew everything that I had gone through, but I also had all of a sudden all these other memories coming in, where there was a whole lot of, oh yeah. And that veil is being lifted, and suddenly you realize you're master of your own ship, captain of your own destiny, and that you're the one who put yourself in here. And that you are.
Just stop. Do you think that, because I had an occurrence this life, which I rarely talk about. I had a big car accident, and the night before I dreamt it. So I saw the whole accident. I woke up screaming because I felt the impact. I saw my kid in the car, and 2 hours later, 3 hours later, I was on the way to the airport in that morning, and the exact thing happened. So that left me with this curiosity. Wait, was this organized? And the answer is
You're foreshadowing that. Absolutely. And generally when you, as you've just proven there, when you dream of something like that, you're not dreaming of your actual physical demise. It's a really interesting process of how I just got out of a session a little while ago where somebody was explaining to me he was reliving the deaths in these past lives or concurrent lives that he had had. But generally what happens if we ever dream our death in present time?
I didn't die in the dream. I saw the police come. Every exact thing that I saw was what happened hours later.
Which is why you would know you weren't going to die in the accident. You were literally leaving yourself a calling card going, take a breath. This is going to happen,
Which is what
but it's not going to take you out.
Okay, so I just wanted a confirmation because I feel like deja vu is an echo of this, that there's times where you watch something and you're so convinced you've been there and you're like, wait, why does this feel like I definitely saw it before? I can't remember when, but I remember seeing it and thinking to myself, sometimes I remember thinking to myself, this is never going to happen. Like I'm observing the observer, like, hold on a minute. Okay,
Right.
this is very confirming. Okay, so now you're on the other side and you're out of your body and the sound comes. And then what
And I'm watching everything unfold. And so, I got to see a few things happen. Like there was a woman who ran up and put her name on the front seat of the passenger, in the passenger side, the windows were gone. And I always thought that, gosh, that's peculiar, name, phone number, and then boom, off she went. Like she didn't stick around. And then there was the guy in the uniform who reached in and turned the ignition off so that because the car was still running. So the engine didn't blow. And then the sound changed again. And we go from this kind of bagpipe hum, which I now, all these years later, 33 years later this year, have come to realize is a frequency that's keeping the soul tethered to the physical experience.
Right.
Which is really cool. People have described it all through the ages. Some call it a silver cord. It's a sound. For me, it was a
Could
sound.
that be tinnitus? Is there any relationship to tinnitus and that sound?
Oh, listen, let me tell you, let me put my doctor's hat on for a second. The amount of people who have reported the change in it, it's because the frequency in the earth plane has changed. The Schumann resonance that a lot of people like to follow, with the sounds and impulses of the frequency of the earth, that resonance has completely changed. Once we went on the other side of the pandemic, the world that we live in is a different version of what we came in.
Frequency.
People don't realize it, and it sounds different.
That's what's going on.
People are able to hear it. Yeah.
Okay. So keep going. So now we're on the other side. The sound changes, and you get a life review.
Yes. So I'm like bathing in this amazing awesomeness, and it was just, I wasn't pining for my body. I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm only 21. It wasn't like that at all. I was just like, here I am. Right. And so when the music changed, and it was like, it was like going from a single instrument to an orchestra. Best way I can describe it. When the music changed, the atmosphere in front of me began to change, and it was palpable. I've told this story thousands of times. I love this part because everything began to change and it took shape. And these two men stepped forward, to me, and that, of course it was two men. Well, let me tell you why it was two men. Because as a child here in this lifetime as Mary Helen, my reverence and love and respect were for old people. I love old people. I was the kid who used to say, drop me off at the nursing home instead of going out to play with my friends. I loved being around elderly people. I could not get enough of them. I'd sit on their laps. I would hug them. I loved watching the fireworks display that was happening around somebody who was preparing to transition. I just, and they felt at ease and comfortable when I was there. And so there was this kind of beautiful synergistic exchange.
So who were those two men? Who were those two men?
So this is why I think they appeared as older men. And so they were my spirit guides. Again, not something we talked about in Sunday school. And through they came, and there's this kind of, when I'm of an age now, when somebody can come in that I might have known for 25 years and I see them monthly in my office, but then if I see them in aisle 9 of the grocery store, I cannot remember their name out of context. And so it was that kind of feeling. I'm looking at him going, I know you. I know you. And then it hit me. And it was like a homecoming, unlike any other homecoming, because in that moment, I was like, holy wow, we're never alone. Ever. No matter how low, how dark, how totally isolated you feel, you are never alone. And it just was like, whoosh, this wave just came over me. And it was awesome. It gives me, my own story is giving me goosebumps. Because that's what happened. And so once that kind of
It's a
realization set in,
vibrational, it's making me cry. I want to tell people this. The imprint of anyone that's had a near-death experience immediately is the frequency changes, and there's an embrace of love that doesn't compare to anything we know down here. So we can't, she's telling us a story, but we can't reference it because there's nowhere in the menu that we have any memory of what it is to be loved in a frequency that lets the entire system relax. And that's why women who just had a baby, or someone who's just gotten married, or someone who's just turned 21 says, it's okay, I'm really happy right here.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like, how do you put words on, the unspeakable? And I have often described it as a place so beautiful that it hurts to remember.
Exactly. It makes people homesick. Exactly.
I can very easily talk about it, and I do this, but if I stayed talking about this moment for about another 5 minutes,
it gets homesick. Yeah, tears.
oh yeah.
So
yeah.
how long were you officially out of your body and dead?
Well, I was on a major highway laying in the pavement by the time they had pulled me out. So it took the time for an ambulance to arrive. And then I came, when I did finally go back in, and I came in like this. I shot up off the pavement. My neck was broken. I didn't know. It was crazy. And it was funny because when they were taking me to the ER, there was this lady who was like stroking my hair, and she was like, it's okay. She kept saying, we're not going to let you die. And I'm going, but anyhow,
How long was it?
it was at least 15, 20 minutes, however long it took an
One of the
ambulance
other
to
things
get
I
there.
want to highlight, I just want to take a moment here. Time stands still, and people have near-death experiences, and they all say, I don't know how much time went by. And it's one of the constructs, back to the human condition, that limits our capacity. Not only do we not know love like we know love there, and it's completely out of our menu, but we also don't understand timelessness. And when time is taken out of the equation, there's something that happens, and there is no nervous system, but there's something that happens to the emotional body.
Right.
That becomes very peaceful.
Yes. I'm so glad that you said that, because this is where my life as I knew it got turned on its ear. So I am sitting in this review, and there is a review, guys. But it's not like what you would think, so imagine me growing up in the Bible Belt, and I'm like, oh my God, where's the guy with the beard and the gavel and the white robe and all this? And I'm looking and I'm going, nope, I'm just enveloped in the love of these guides, and it's me. And I'm looking around, and it was like being in the middle of a 360 cinema. And I'm watching that kitchen table talk where my dad's asking me about alive and dead at 4. I'm watching myself in Virginia Beach getting lost on the beach. I'm getting my first bulldog, Otto von Bismarck, and I'm 11. I am getting my driver's license, and I'm 16. I'm drinking too much at a college party and being raped at 17. I'm going off and getting my college diploma here. It's all happening simultaneously. And you want to talk about a mind bender? What was the most challenging, I won't say difficult, but challenging aspect of coming back into the life that I left was coming back in with the knowledge that this space-time construct we've created in order to have this 3D experience here in the earth realm is BS. And I've had to live like that. And so my daughters are so funny. They'll call me out on it all the time. Like there's that moment where you should be really angry about something. And my daughter will go, are you doing that thing where you pretend like you're really upset right now? And I'll go, yeah, because it's really hard to get upset over the phone bill or the whatever. And all, because how this all plays out. And I'm like, I have to fake sometimes getting upset or angry about things because I just don't possess it. It's just not there. It's fake.
So let's just speak to this for the audience. So when we take our ego and we attach it to this reality, there is a very simple agreement that you'll go myopic and you'll forget everything. It's like amnesia comes over you.
Yes.
When you have a near-death experience, which I've had, then you enter.
Woo!
Oh my God. I don't know. When you have, I'm not going to say what's when you have a near-death experience, there is a reference now. And the reference diminishes and reduces the ego from identifying with, oh, me, oh, poor me, oh, fat me, oh, skinny me, oh, happy me, oh, sad me, oh, my kids. And so therefore, this is why God couldn't afford to let us reduce that, because the management of the human experience, write this down, is to learn the lessons here the hard way. That's the nature of this reality. Now, if you had a choice between living it through the hard way or being able to laugh in the middle of a fight, you would have to choose laughter in a fight, but that's not the plan, Stan. Okay, back to you. So you go through the life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you're sitting in and realizing as you're watching these elements of the life you've just left happening simultaneously. And you're like, ooh, not only have we lived before, but hang on, drum roll. Oh, this is why different people are able to step into different experiences and realities and experience something as, it's like when everybody goes, well, how come everybody who's been dead was Cleopatra or Napoleon or somebody like this? Because, guys, that's available to all of us. So picture spinning plates at the circus. You've got all these plates that are spinning. So there is not a beginning and a middle and an end to a lifetime. There is to a body. But to the actual experience, 1571 is happening right now. So is 2080. And all of these things are happening simultaneously. So as a time-bending time traveler, I'm able to go forward or back or sideways and retrieve elements of where people have left pieces of themselves that are tripping them up in present time. That's my jam. That's what I do now.
Hello to astrology. Because what astrology does is it names the karma that you left behind that comes back this lifetime. And whether that's with the use of Saturn, or no one's going to believe what I'm about to say, or the use of Chiron, or whether that's the use of the South Node, there's different variables in the chart that give us a clue about what the past life karma that repeats itself now. So the sooner you identify what am I supposed to be learning, and you bring those broken, fractured pieces from the past lives, there is an upscaling that allows the being to enter into a different frequency completely.
Completely. Yes. And that's how it works. And then this is when somebody inevitably in the audience puts their hands up and goes, so are you saying I gave myself cancer? And are you saying that Hitler was a loved and beloved soul by the universe and all? And I was like, yes, yes. And that really ticks people off, because while we're here blinded by the dichotomy, they need justice. This idea of being recognized for their suffering and becoming that story. And it's quite simple. If you sat most people down and went, hey, if I could give you the most amazing, peaceful, incredibly full of love and joy experience for the remainder of your life, and all you had to do was let go of your story of suffering, the vast majority of people would not take you up on the offer.
Okay, this is my new book. It's called the I Don't Believe in Astrology book. It's coming out in a year in 13 languages. And part of the entrance of the first book is, I wanted to call it You're Fucked Up and I Still Like You, but no one wanted to let me use that one, because
I would have let you use that.
Thank you. The nature of the human mind by design has design faults that are required in order for you to get the lesson through the pain body. So just letting you know, nothing's wrong with pain. Easy for me to say. But that's easy for me to say now that I've made it through the eye of the needle. I went through this lifetime. I'm almost 70. I had a lot of life lessons that had to go through my lifetime and pain for me to be able to get to the place that you just said. I mean, I'm responsible.
Yeah,
I chose all of this. I've been given this as an assignment. I'm clearing karma for my family. Didn't know that. Back to you. So you go. So
this is why Judge sent me in that moment when I decided I was coming back. Because guess what, guys? It was my choice, 100%.
Did they give you the option?
I'm the architect of my own reality. It wasn't they were there residing over my fate. They were there to support me.
Did they give you the option? Did they actually give you?
I gave me the option. I said, get back in there, chicken. Now suddenly my father, the football coach, get in there. You're not done yet. And I realized this and I was like, oh my God, because, like I'm coming out of college, I've been partying, I was a cheerleader, I used to put the scores of the basketball games in my underwear drawer and go cheer at the games and then come back and crack open a beer. And they'd be like, oh, look, she predicted the score. This is the extent of my service to humanity. That was what I was doing, right? I was a kid. So it takes this accident. And I had set up that if I had not reached the classic 21-year-old adult phase of life without utilizing these gifts that I came in here with, that I was going to have one great big kaboom of an accident to push myself on and give myself two options. One was you either get in here and do what you came here to do or get out. And so I decided I would come and do what I came here to do. And in that moment, when I made that decision and I came back in, you want to talk about breakneck speed? I came back into a body with a broken neck. I had so many challenges. I'm deaf in my left ear. I detached my retina in my eye, broke everything down this side of my body. It was tough. It was really tough because so many of the injuries were undiscovered. They unfolded as time went on. So now, Judge, and by the way, I didn't tell you this beforehand, he had been dead since I was 1. This is why it was such a shocker when my parents were like going, okay, sweetie, can you see it? And I'm like, yeah, he's right there, because he'd been dead since I was 1 year old. And now Judge comes back. He's always been a presence in my life. Do you remember Quantum Leap? Do you remember the dude who would show up? He was always there chatting away. Like, that's my Judge, my holographic guide. And so he would come in and next thing he's telling me, you're going to chiropractic school. And he would say, we're sending you. And I'm like, who's this we? And then I'm like, oh, we got it. And I'm going, hold on a second. Chiropractic school, aren't they the guys that they make fun of? Like, what is this? So what is this? You're a surgeon.
Wait, hold on. They said it to you while you were on the other side?
No, as soon as I came back.
So Judge showed up?
Judge shows up and he's like, you're going back to school. And I was like, oh, hell no. I just graduated. I've been in school all my life, right? And I'm like, the idea of going back to become a doctor, are you kidding me? And then I'm like, are they even real doctors? What is this? And so he said, you're going to understand. And what he was referring to was the fact that the way that I practice chiropractic, the school, Sherman College of Chiropractic that I went to in South Carolina, was a rare bird because the mind, body, spirit aspect of the vitalism that is afforded to us as human beings, understanding that you reside inside of a meat suit that was perfectly pressurized and designed to serve your soul, instead of the other way around, as some body who's trying to find its way back to its divinity and spirituality. You already are that which you seek. Go in, immerse yourself in that philosophy, and get out there and start helping the people that you came here to help. And I was like, oh. So I go and I become educated in chiropractic, and I have this understanding of, the importance of the central nervous system, how the actual body works. Because the difference between this vitalistic philosophy and this mechanistic allopathic world that we've been beaten into submission to, like it dictates everything that we do. We choose doctors based on insurance. You're being told what to do in a pandemic instead of trusting your own body and listening to your own instincts, and you're chastised and criticized. And, that's the difference. One empowers and one removes the power. One is telling you, you better take this because your body's not capable of handling this. And the other is going, keep your body, be ready for the dance when that music starts.
Can we talk about the nervous system? Because it's something, I don't know why it's been a fixation this whole life for me, but I know that one of my gifts has been able to regulate by keeping myself grounded. And I see when this planet right now, and every astrologer knows this, we're coming into a very scary time. It's already here where, there's going to be floods, and there's going to be ice, and there's going to be fire, and there's going to be heat. And there's all these crazy things that are increasing to the tune of, oh my goodness, it's happening down the street. What will you do in your nervous system to use this information about the near-death other world and bring it here back to you as a Gemini rising? You're a bridge between worlds. That's your soul. The rising sign is your soul. And you're Gemini, which is the connector of the heaven and the earth with their mouth.
I got a mouth on me, that's for sure.
So my question about the nervous system is, I have learned through meditation, through walking barefoot, through drinking water. I have a whole series of things that has helped me not age because I've been so deliberate about my nervous system, doing yoga, being in saunas, being in hot tubs, being in cold plunges before it was
And it shows.
right. But I want to say to the audience, from your point of view as a doctor who's been to the other side, is it as relevant as I think?
Yes. Yes. It is as relevant as you think.
Can,
So for instance, and it's, I happen to be a chiropractor, so I use chiropractor as that vehicle. Basically what we're doing is we are interfacing with the nervous system through the spine, through the bones of the cranium, through the pelvis, through the spine. And, when you realize the importance of that, like anybody who's into anything that's slightly mystical or woo-woo knows the power of 33, knows the power of the number 33. And there's a
yes.
reason that number is so powerful because, you've got 33 bones in that spine. It's Jacob's ladder, guys.
It's
You're
a master
climbing
number.
that spine.
It's
a
a
magic
master number. It's Jesus, how old Jesus was when he finished.
Well, it's a lot of things through a lot of times. And so when you realize that nervous system, that brain is that conduit that is giving direction. If someone is trying to dull you down or dull your experience here down, the best way to do that is to interfere with the nervous system. And this can happen chemically, physically, and emotionally, each in equal measure. And it's really important for people to understand that when a chiropractor is saying, you know what, let's come in and let's do some maintenance. Everybody who comes to my office, unless they're a brand new patient, that waiting room's full of people who've been with me for 25 years. And they're bringing their children and they're bringing their grandchildren because they understand via the education of that vitalistic philosophy, the science, and the art of chiropractic, because it's all of those things. They understand how important the function of that nervous system is.
That just helped me so much. That's exactly. So I want to say back to the near-death experience. Off she goes to the other side. She gets the awareness that she's choosing it, although it's a little confusing for us to understand who's they and who's me. You seem to understand that. I can't distinguish between whoever put that dream into my awareness that put me in the accident that gave me so all of that is a mystery, not that the mind should be the one responsible to dictate or give us, because really it's the heart. But you can feel with Mary Helen, and you can feel with me, whoever's listening to this, some part of you is lit up by this conversation. You're being reminded that there's a much bigger picture, and that while Tim, my dear friend Tim, was reluctant to leave here, that was his ego identified with this place with so much conviction that he couldn't shake it off. So I want to invite all of you listening. Why do we study astrology? Why are we interested in reading these books? Because the ego is a culprit. Its whole mission is to interrupt your soul from calming down your nervous system. I don't know who made this game up. That's what the beginning of my book is. The design fault of the ego, evading God's oneness as compared to the soul, source of universal love. Why would we not lean into the soul? But that's what a near-death experience does. And the nervous system has got to be in place. In addition to all this information in your head, go see a chiropractor, go find your healer. I just want to say what it takes to get meditation, massage, making sure you're barefoot. There's nothing I can tell you that will make a difference in the future of this planet than people with a calm nervous system.
Exactly. It all starts at home, guys. And so one of the things that I ended up coming back with was this incredible ability to interface with frequency. And so my whole world changed. I was always that freaky little kid. I could talk to dead people and I could see auras around things and all. And then I was like, what are you doing with this? And then bang, this accident happens. And now I suddenly come back and I'm like, oh, so I have this ability to step into somebody's presence, whether it's here or 5,000 miles away, and download a hard drive. And I'm listening to their story. I'm listening to their body give me a recount and a recap of what they've been through, not only in this lifetime, but in other realities that are currently causing distress. And it's really interesting when you were talking about the ego and your friend Tim, because we also get into a space where we think, oh my God, that death looks so distressing and what an awful way to go. What I can tell you is, how awful is it to get smashed by a car and your neck break at 75 miles an hour? Right before that happened, I was already out of the body. I watched that body get hit and I had the detached interest of somebody watching a football game. And so whether somebody's shot or they've been raped and died, or they've been killed in a car accident, or they drowned, that same process takes place. You are always in charge. And don't forget that sometimes the parting gift of that dying person who's so important in your life is to leave behind something that may look less than pleasant, something that appears to be distressful. And what they're actually doing is giving you a different perspective, a different opportunity to interact with what you thought you knew to be true. And the greatest example of this, and I'd love to share this with you, because my dad, I think we've established he's this kind of big, booming, dynamic Southern preacher and football star and all this. He spent his entire adult life, his entire career, trying to teach people not to fear death, how to get into the kingdom. And then when he gets dementia and then moves into Alzheimer's, his greatest fear was death. And I remember looking, going, what is this? Imagine dedicating your whole life to helping people. And then all of a sudden, when you lose your mind, you lose that confidence and understanding and that connection that you've established. And I was like, well, this is crazy. So I watched. Instead of judging it, I observed it. So there was this one day in particular that my mother and I were in the nursing home with Dad, and he was this powerful orator, and he had lost the ability to speak, and it just used to make him cry. Like, he would open his mouth and try and just babble, and he would just start to cry. Oh my gosh, it was just heartbreaking to watch. But he was in this phase of the dementia and Alzheimer's called sundowners, where he would get violent. And he was the most loving man, but he would just like go to lash out. And it was terrifying because he was a big guy. And he'd had a particularly hard day this day. And he was shuffling around the nursing home, and he was in washing his hands, and he'd go out into the hallway. And I mean, just every undignified act you could think of for such a wonderful person, there it was, right in your face. And he would not lie down in the bed, because you could tell he was terrified that if he went horizontal, he was going to die. So he would sleep sitting up. It was crazy to watch, y'all. I mean, it was crazy until there was this day, and he'd shuffled around, and he goes all of a sudden, and he climbs into bed, and my mom and I are looking at each other, and she was like, what is he doing? And I was like, just watch. And he lies back in the bed, and he starts reaching up. And my mom's eyes are as big as saucers, and she's like, is he dying? And I went, because guys, when somebody is dying, instead of it being like a dimmer switch turning down, the auric field looks like fireworks. It's so beautiful. That's why, again, I used to love hanging out in the nursing home, free show as a kid. And you're watching, everything is gearing up as they're getting ready to make the departure. It's stunning. And I'm looking at my dad, and there's no fireworks. And I'm like, Mom, he's having an event. There is something happening, but he's not dying right now. So Dad's laying back, he's reaching up, and now the guy who hasn't spoken in months, who could not get out as much as a babble, he starts shouting, I can see it. I can see it. And I was like, hey, Dad, and he was like, hey, sugar. And I said, what can you see? He said, the land beyond the river. And then it was like Dad was there for that moment, because he turned to me and he pats me on the hand. I had like 3 books written at this stage, and he pats me on the hand and he goes, it's more beautiful than anything you ever wrote about. And we were dying laughing. And I was like, oh my gosh, tell me what you see. And he was like, Mama. And she looks so young. And I was like, oh, and my mom is just like shaking her head going, I can't even believe this is happening. And then this was the moment. My father just freezes, and he goes, oh my gosh, Daddy's here. Now for my dad, my grandfather had never been present for him. He was, by all standards, he had some good times, and was not a family man. And this had always really troubled my father, especially within the confines of his box of Christianity. And I'm a fan of the boxes, guys. People are like, live outside of the box. The boxes are here to serve you. They're not bad things. But anyway, so within the confines of that box, my grandfather hadn't cut the mustard. So my father had secretly distressed all of his life that his dad hadn't made it. And that really bothered him. So now all of a sudden he's in this moment and he's looking at us and he was like, Daddy, Daddy's here. And I was just like this. And my mom was like agape, because she knew how much this had bothered my father. And he turns around and he looks at my mom and he goes, Helen, I've had it wrong all along. You can't mess this thing up. Everybody's welcome here. And that right there, above dying, above anything I've ever done, was the mic drop moment of my lifetime. Getting to witness him transition in those moments, going from his certainty to the safety of his soul, to the judgment of somebody else's soul and its whereabouts, to the fear of death in that moment, to actually getting to physically experience and have a visceral connection beyond the veil. And the peace that that brought into him in that moment, oh my gosh, there it was.
Thank you so much for that story. Everyone's welcome here. And how did your dad actually leave?
Through Alzheimer's, he had that condition.
Did it soften his edge?
It eventually, once they pass that kind of violent aspect of it, and then they don't know, the hardest part for them is when they're realizing that they're slipping away. They're still half in, like one foot's in, and that's so painful. It's so hard for them to watch. But then once they're through the door, it's easier.
So we're just going to finish this. I'd love to do a second interview with you. I feel like
let's do it.
This conversation to my audience and elsewhere, especially for me, nothing I didn't know, and the visceral experience of your moon in Taurus at 29 degrees, the way that you embody, so you're not just talking, you're coming out of direct experience. That's the difference of the New Age and the millions of books that have been written about near death. When I heard your story and I watched that, and you must go watch her full hour and 15, say his name again?
Anthony Shea. Yeah.
Chene. You guys go watch all of his near-death experiences and use this energy that I'm handing you today to know that, yes, your story is important. And yes, your ego is going to convince you that you're all screwed up and that everything about your life is wrong and you made a million mistakes and it was so heavy. And yes, the fear of your father having abandoned you or not being, it's not true. So we're here to adjust. The ego mind must be under the effect of the soul. And until the ego mind, we call it the observer, until you can step out and turn into the observer, you're a victim. And this podcast today is a very loud message. Whatever you're going through, whatever your body's going through, whatever your children are going through, it's a lesson that was signed up by a free will zone. There's only volunteers allowed on this planet, and there's 8 billion of them. And by the way, and I'd love to talk about this in our next interview, there is something coming for the future that will resemble what your ego mind is scared of, better known as death, not to mention change. But that has nothing to do with the truth. How do we distinguish the ego mind from the truth? We use our heart. So if Mary and I just touched your heart, take a breath. Let's do it together. Big breath in, hold it at the top. And breathe out calm. Give yourself the calm of knowing that this illusion, while convincing and very important, is not the truth. It's an illusion that's here to stalk you, to activate your soul. And that's why we're here.
And if I can tell you, it's okay to allow fear. Fear can be a very tangible, palpable, and important emotion. But here's the way to handle it. Allow it to have a voice, because sometimes it's there to prevent you from stepping in your own shit. Allow it to have a voice, but never a vote.
Oh, allow it to have a voice, but never a vote. Okay, I'm writing that down. Didn't you like the part about soul, source of universal love, source of unconditional love? Whoever heard of that? And you want to hear what fear is? I'm going to finish with this. Forgetting everything's all right.
Amen. And pass the butter.
Okay, so thank you. And we will definitely do this again. I'm going to get you on the podcast continues. I am so thankful for the listeners. I'm so
grateful. Thank you.
Our
Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Our chemistry are so obvious. You allow me to speak, and your story is the substance that I can stand on, because you don't have to have a near-death experience to have the contagious effect of this love. I love you, Mary. I can't wait to do this again.
I love you too.
Okay, well, you guys, stay tuned.
Thank you so much for listening. We want to keep this conversation going with you, so please subscribe to our podcast and leave a rating and review to make sure you never miss an episode. Remember, climate activist by day, human by night. Send Debra a DM on Instagram at Debra Silverman Astrology and visit DebraSilvermanAstrology.com. And we're going to leave you like we leave every single episode. Make it your mission to change the world.